My brother told everyone I was a thief until the court played the security footage. The first frame is a black mirror. My face stares back from a paused video on the courtroom screen, smaller than I feel and 1,000 times more tired. I smell old varnish and paper. Someone coughs, shoes scrape. The clerk asks, "Ready?" And my lawyer nods, the click of her pen like a gavel. I try not to blink. "Play," the judge says, and the world pulls air through its teeth. I remember the last time I heard a sound that clean. It was my mother's kettle 2 months ago, shrieking happiness because the whole family was home for Sunday borscht. Dad carved pork in the kitchen, humming the same 3 bars of some old song. My brother, Sasha, the bright son, held court at the table, narrating his week and spitting sunflower seed shells into a paper towel like a man in a stadium. He had that practiced casualness of people who know other people are watching. His jacket, olive green, elbow patch stitched by a girlfriend 3 girlfriends ago, dripped rain onto the chair back and the floor. I washed my hands, kissed Mom's cheek, and tucked my tote under the bench in the hall. Everyone was talking over everyone. The house swelled and sighed the way old houses do when too many people breathe inside them. It was nothing and everything. It was the last normal hour I had. It wasn't until late, dishes stacked like bricks and Dad pretending not to notice, that Mom remembered the ring. Her mother's ring. She wore it only when we were all together, a small ritual of belonging. She touched the place on her finger where it should have bitten a little, a habit, a check, and then she lifted her hand like she could catch it back out of the air. "The ring," she said. We all looked at the same spot, at the same slow-draining sink, as if a diamond might bob to the surface like a lemon seed. "I had it," Mom said, softer. "When I needed the dough. There's a pause you can feel in your bones, like a cold front entering a room." Sasha moved first, too quickly. "It'll turn up," he said, choosing brightness like he always did. Then he became helpful, checking under napkins, between placemats, in the thin crack where the table leaf sits. I did the same. Dad pulled out drawers. The kitchen turned inside out. Wooden spoons clattered onto towels, salt fell like snow. We found coins, 2008, a dried currant, a list of chores from when I was 12. We did not find the ring. We also did not immediately recall the safe because the safe was a private thing, and Mom is the kind of woman who keeps privacy in her apron pocket next to the clothespins. It was only when she went to put away the tip money from the bakery, she does a few mornings a week, that she said it, small and wrong. The envelope. There was an envelope in the safe. There wasn't now. She said it twice. The first time to the hallway. The second time directly to my father. "What envelope?" Sasha asked, interest sharp. Cash," Dad said. "For the plumber, for the dentist, for things." He didn't say the number. The number landed later, flat as a shovel on dirt. $1,800. No one accused anyone then. Not with mouths. With eyes, maybe. I felt every old story stand up inside our walls, the ones about which child was careful and which one was charming, who once lost a library book and who called to apologize for being 3 minutes late. It would have been absurd if it weren't suddenly terrifying. I went home with a tight smile and a promise to check between my car seats. People love to say you never think it'll happen to you. They're wrong. We constantly rehearse disaster. I just didn't think it would be this kind, the kind that hands your face to other people and says, "Decide." At 7:13 the next morning, my phone lit up like a broken slot machine. Family chat first, exploding with Sasha's paragraphs, the blue bubble lengthening, as if outrage were a race he could win by calories burned. He had a screenshot of Mom's safe open like we were conspirators in a heist. "This is not okay," he wrote. "Someone stole from our parents," he wrote. By 7:18, he stopped saying someone. He started saying my name. The posts came 5 minutes after that. He copied his concern to Facebook, then to Instagram. Then he layered it with a selfie so sad it might have been an ad for storm insurance. My name was blurred, then unblurred in the comments, then blurred again in a half-hearted attempt at decency. "I hate to do this publicly," he typed, doing it publicly. But blood is supposed to be thicker. People I recognized by their wedding photos and vacation reels wrote that they were praying for strength. An aunt I haven't seen since 2012 added a long story about character. The only person who messaged me privately was a cousin who said, "What the hell?" and "Are you okay?" And then, after a long time, delete your socials. It's only going to get worse. Work saw it too. My client, who'd only ever asked about timelines and KPIs, suddenly asked for a pause. My boss wrote, "We're supportive, but this is a sensitive situation for the brand." Brand. I became a brand that morning, something to protect yourself from, like a stain or a rumor of mold in the ceiling. I sat at my kitchen table with a cold mug and said out loud, "I didn't do this." It made absolutely no difference to the light coming through the blinds. I called my mother and got her voicemail twice. The third time she answered, her voice was the voice she uses at church. Too soft for the outside world. The edges buffed. "Let's not make it bigger," she said. "Your brother is upset." I asked if she thought I did it. She said, "I think we are all tired." When I pressed, the kettle screamed in their kitchen and she said, almost grateful for the interruption, "The water," and left me holding a dial tone that felt like a decision. Dad didn't pick up at all. Sasha, of course, picked up immediately. He didn't say hello. He said, "Return it," like we were in the middle of a conversation I'd somehow missed. When I told him I didn't have anything to return, he sighed into the microphone like a broken accordion. "You're not even going to try a little?" he asked. He had a way of acting like he was disappointed for my benefit, a compassionate executioner. "You always did this," he said. "Make a mess and pretend you're above it." I found myself in the hallway of their building that evening, knocking like a stranger at my parents' door. I had receipts, timelines, texts, paper armor for a fight I didn't understand. The neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Kovalchuk, with the tiny dog and the floral robe, opened her door at the same time. She nodded at me and then at the little black circle above her bell. "Got one of those new door cameras," she said conspiratorially, the dog blinking from her elbow like a baby owl. "Very modern." I smiled like I cared about modern and not about how my birth family had turned into a tribunal overnight. Inside, Mom kept her eyes on the tea. Dad stood behind a chair as if he were a guest waiting to be invited to sit. Sasha lounged in the living room as if nothing had been decided, and everything had. "We just want to talk," he said, which is what you say when you're going to talk at someone. I explained my Sunday, then my Monday, then my bank app. I explained why I parked where I did, why I left when I did, what I wore. I could hear myself tighten into a kind of exactness that sounds like lying if you've already decided it's lying. Mom wiped an already clean corner of the counter. Dad's jaw ticked. Sasha smiled sadly, the way people on television do when they're about to say something cruel and reasonable. "Marina," he said, and put my name down like a heavy box. "It's not about the money, it's about trust." He took a beat like a speechwriter, then added, "You always had sticky fingers. You just finally got caught." He said it gently, as if kindness were a spice he was sprinkling on top of poison to help it go down. The kettle screamed again. I tasted the metal in it. All the air in the room leaned hard toward him, because that's what air does around a story that flatters it. I looked at the patched elbow of his jacket slung over the chair. Olive green, ragged thread bright against the fabric, and something inside me steadied. I wasn't sure what I would do yet. I just knew that if I stood still 1 second longer, his version would take root in my mouth and grow there. I picked up my tote, the receipts sliding like small, apologetic fish. "I didn't do this," I said, "because there's dignity in redundancy when nobody believes you. And I will prove it." He laughed, easy, an open palm. "Sure," he said. "Good luck." Then he leaned close enough that I could smell mint gum and something sour under it and whispered where only I could hear, "You're not built for this." I left with my heart hammering so hard the hallway vibrated. The tiny dog barked twice as if participating. Mrs. Kovalchuk's camera watched, impassive. I pressed the elevator button and imagined security footage in 1,000 quiet buildings. Red dots blinking, hard drives whirring, the truth sitting there like a patient animal, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to call it by name. The days after that night fell into a strange rhythm. Me counting receipts like rosary beads, Sasha posting updates like he was a news anchor. My parents walking through their home as though every surface might sprout another missing thing. I woke to messages, not good mornings, but verdicts. Friends I'd known since childhood wrote vague comments about boundaries and disappointments. One even texted me, "Hey, if you needed money, why didn't you just ask?" As if the only thing between me and theft was the courage to beg. At work, it got worse. I could feel my boss avoiding my desk, her voice an octave higher when she addressed me. At lunch, no one sat at my table. A client who had trusted me for months suddenly requested that someone else handle their account. Reputational risk, the email said. The words made my skin crawl, like I was a defective product being recalled. I went home every night and stared at the ceiling, playing the same question on repeat. How do you prove you didn't take something that isn't there? I tried with my parents again. I printed my bank statements, my credit card history, my work badge logs showing what time I left the office. I carried them in a manila folder and it felt absurd, like defending myself against a crime I hadn't even been charged with yet. When I spread them out on the kitchen table, Mom's hands trembled over them. "It's not about papers, Marina," she said softly, and that broke me more than Sasha's shouting ever could. Papers are all I had. Facts were all I had. If they weren't enough, then nothing was. Sasha played his part to perfection. He didn't yell anymore. He sighed. He posted sad little updates about family hurting family and wrote vague captions like, "It's always the one you least expect." His friends and followers showered him with support. Every heart emoji was another nail in my coffin. He was clever about it. Never outright said, "Marina stole," but everyone knew who he meant. He didn't have to name me when I was already the villain in his story. By the end of the week, I was raw. I barely slept, my body caught in that constant tightness between fight and flight. I stopped answering texts. I stopped going out. I almost believed him. Almost. Because the way everyone looked at me made me question the corners of my own memory. Had I? Number. But the thought lodged like a splinter. It was the smallest thing that cracked the surface. I was leaving my parents' building again, folder limp in my hands, when Mrs. Kovalchuk shuffled out with her dog. She smiled like always, then tapped the black circle above her door. "This thing," she said, "records even when I forget to lock it. So modern." I nodded, distracted, then froze halfway to the elevator. A camera. Always on. Facing the hall where the garage entrance was. My heart thumped once, hard, like a drumstick against a skin. "Does it keep the footage?" I asked carefully. She shrugged. "Of course. My son set it up, says it saves everything to the cloud." "Why?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. Because how do you explain to a neighbor that your brother might have stolen from your parents and pinned it on you? That night I sat on my couch, staring at the ceiling again, but this time with a pulse of hope under the ribs. Maybe, just maybe, someone had been watching. I didn't know how to ask. Barging into her apartment and demanding the recordings felt wrong. I needed help, someone who understood how to make this official. The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office for the first time in my life. It smelled like old books and toner. A woman named Olena Hrinyuk listened while I spilled everything, my words tumbling out so fast they tripped over each other. She didn't nod sympathetically like friends do. She wrote notes, precise and sharp. When I finished, she tapped her pen and said, "We need a chain of custody. If the footage exists, we have to secure it properly, or it won't hold up." She said it like she'd done it 100 times before. My chest loosened a fraction. Together we drafted a request. Official, stamped. Suddenly I wasn't just a desperate sister. I was a petitioner with rights. When I knocked on Mrs. Kovalchuk's door again, I had a paper in my hand. She frowned, then read, then nodded. "Ah, legal," she said. "Good. Less gossip that way." Her dog sneezed in agreement. 2 days later, I had a copy. Not just a hunch or a memory, proof. The first time I watched it, my stomach dropped. The hallway at 1:42 a.m., a figure in a hoodie moving quick but not panicked. They didn't break in. They had a key. The face was shadowed, but the walk was burned into me from years of sharing a childhood. A cocky half stride, one foot rolling a little to the outside. And the jacket. olive green. Patch on the elbow catching the light for half a second before the figure slipped into the garage. 15 minutes later, they came out with something under their arm. My brother's jacket, my brother's gait. My breath stuttered. I pressed pause, rewind, play, over and over, staring at that split-second glint of stitching. That night, I dreamed in loops of grainy footage, of red recording lights blinking like eyes. My phone buzzed at 2:17 a.m., a message from a number I knew too well. Anya, Sasha's girlfriend. "I'm sorry," it read. Then, after a pause, "Can we meet? Without him?" My throat tightened. The house was silent except for my heart. I stared at the text, then typed back one word. "When?" We met at a cafe 3 neighborhoods away, the kind of place with chipped mugs and sticky menus, where no one looks too closely at anyone else. Anya looked smaller without Sasha next to her, like she'd deflated an inch. She wore her hair tucked into a scarf and kept glancing at the door as if he might follow her. When she saw me, her eyes filled immediately, not with tears but with something rawer, like shame and relief wrapped together. "I didn't know he'd go this far," she said, before I'd even sat down. Her voice cracked, then steadied. "He said it was just borrowing, that your parents had plenty, that he'd fix it before anyone noticed." She rubbed her hands on her jeans. I believed him. I always believe him. My chest ached. I wanted to be angry, but the exhaustion was heavier. "Did you see him take it?" I asked. She nodded. Small, like she wished she could shake her head instead. "He said you'd never notice if he pinned it on you. People already think you're cold, Marina. That's what he said. Cold means unlikable. Unlikable means believable." Her words slid into me like ice water. Sasha hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen how people saw me. He'd weaponized my quietness, my orderliness. I pulled out my laptop and showed her the footage. The pause button froze his elbow patch in perfect clarity. She sucked in air. "That's his jacket," she whispered. "God, he wears it everywhere." "And this," I said, opening another file. I'd managed, with Hryniuk's help, to trace a transaction at a nearby pawn shop, 2 blocks from their apartment, time-stamped the morning after the ring disappeared. The receipt blurred the name, but the ID number ended in 7312. I already knew those digits. They were Sasha's. Anya stared at the screen. "He used his own ID?" she said, like she couldn't decide if it was arrogance or stupidity. "It's something we can prove," I answered. My hands shook as I closed the laptop. "Will you testify?" Her face folded in on itself. "If I do, he'll never forgive me. If I don't, you'll burn for something he did." She covered her face for a second, breathing like someone underwater. Then she looked at me and nodded. "Yes, I'll tell them." I walked home with the video heavy in my bag, the receipt printed twice, and Anya's shaky promise replaying in my head. For the first time in weeks, hope wasn't just a word. It had edges. It could cut. Still, Sasha wasn't slowing down. That weekend, he posted a story with a black background and white letters. Funny how silence speaks louder than denial. He added a sad song, tagged no one, but everyone knew. My notifications filled with comments from distant cousins, former classmates, even coworkers who'd barely said 2 words to me in person. "Heartbreaking if true," one wrote. Another, "Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty." Each one twisted like a knife. Mom called me, her voice brittle. "Maybe give it back quietly, Marina, before it ruins him completely." I pressed the phone to my ear until it hurt. "You think I did this?" I said. Not a question, just a statement, flat and cold. She didn't answer. The silence was worse than anything she could have said. I hung up and went straight to Hryniuk. She didn't blink when I told her. "Families crumble over less," she said. "But the law isn't about feelings. We need a clean chain of custody." She drafted subpoenas for the pawn shop and logged every piece of evidence. The footage from Kovalchuk's camera, the receipt with the partial ID, Anya's pending testimony. She explained how each item had to be handled, who touched it, who stored it, how to prove it hadn't been tampered with. "Juries don't trust messy evidence," she told me. "We'll make it neat." That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, hearing my mother's words on repeat, "Before it ruins him completely." She was still protecting him, even now. The kettle screamed in my memory, echoing in my skull. But then I saw the footage again. His jacket, his gait, his arrogance. For once, I let myself imagine what it would feel like when the truth wasn't just mine to carry. At 11:43 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A voice memo, not from me, but from Anya. Her message was only 5 words. "You should hear this yourself?" I pressed play, and Sasha's voice filled the room, low and smug. Finally got her. Marina's too perfect. She had to crack eventually. Now everyone sees her for what she really is. She'll fold first. She always does. My whole body went still. He hadn't just lied, he'd celebrated it. And Anya had caught it. I sat in the dark, phone glowing in my palm, pulse roaring in my ears. For the first time since this began, I knew. He wasn't just my brother anymore. He was my accuser, my executioner. And I was about to turn into his undoing. The next morning I walked into Hryniuk's office with the audio still playing on loop in my head. She listened once, her eyes narrowing with every smug word Sasha had recorded. When the clip ended, she leaned back in her chair, tapped the pen against her notepad, and said, "This is the final nail. But we do this properly. If we screw up chain of custody, it's useless." She drafted a sworn statement with Anya's signature, then added the voice memo to an evidence log. Each step was like building a fortress brick by brick. Who obtained the file, how it was stored, what software verified its authenticity. She explained it all to me, patient but firm. Courts don't like drama. They like paper trails. We'll give them one so straight even your brother can't wiggle through. Meanwhile, my parents were splintering. Mom called me late one night, whispering as if the walls might listen. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding," she said. I wanted to laugh, but it caught in my throat. The camera doesn't misunderstand, Mom. The pawnshop receipt doesn't misunderstand. His own girlfriend recorded him. There was a silence, long and aching. Then she said, "He's still my son." "I'm your daughter too," I answered, but she didn't reply. Dad was different. He didn't say much at all. One evening when I came by, he sat at the kitchen table in the dark, a glass of water in front of him. "Your mother hopes it's not true," he said, without looking at me. But me, I saw him sneak cigarettes when he was 15. He always thought he was smarter than the house. Now he thinks he's smarter than the world. His voice cracked once, barely. "Do what you have to do." The preliminary hearing came sooner than I expected. Sasha swaggered in like he was attending a performance, not a courtroom. His lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, desperate for attention, willing to drag my brother's name through the mud. But when Hryniuk stood, she didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "We intend to demonstrate 3 synchronized videos, a certified receipt, and corroborating testimony." She stacked the folders neatly on the table. For the first time I saw Sasha flinch, just a twitch in the jaw, but I caught it. He knew the walls were closing. Outside, after the session ended, Anya found me by the steps. Her hands shook as she handed me her phone. "I still have more messages," she said, "in case he tries to twist things." She looked pale, torn between loyalty and relief. I loved him, but love isn't supposed to feel like drowning. I wanted to thank her, to tell her she was braver than she realized, but the words felt too heavy. I just nodded. The weeks leading up to the trial dragged like years. Sasha kept posting cryptic updates, trying to control the narrative. "Some people will sell family for attention," he wrote one night, pairing it with a photo of himself looking noble under a streetlight. His followers chimed in, all sympathy and blind faith. It still hurt, but less than before, because I knew what we had. I spent those nights watching the footage on repeat, memorizing every frame, the way the patched jacket flashed under the hall light, the way his stride tilted to the side, the way his car pulled out of the pawnshop lot. Each time my pulse steadied a little more. Not because I wanted revenge, but because for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed the truth might actually matter. The night before the trial, Mom showed up at my apartment. She looked 10 years older, her shoulders stooped, a plastic bag of old photographs clutched in her hand. She spread them across my table, me in school plays, Sasha grinning with missing teeth, birthdays, trips. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "I don't know how to forgive him," she said. "But I don't know how to forgive myself either. I raised both of you. And I failed one of you. I reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "don't let it kill who you are." I wanted to tell her it already had, a little, but instead I promised, "I'll survive this." The next morning I walked into court with Hrynyuk beside me, her heels clicking like clock hands. Sasha was already there, lounging as though nothing could touch him. His lawyer whispered in his ear, but he kept scanning the room, smirking when his eyes landed on me. He didn't know yet. He didn't know the cameras, the receipts, the voice memo waiting to be played. He thought he'd written the script. Tomorrow, when the judge said, "Play," he'd learn just how wrong he was. The courtroom smelled of dust and coffee when the bailiff called the case. My palms were damp against the wood of the table, every nerve in my body tuned to one sound, the word play. They started with me. The prosecutor asked me to recount Sunday night, my mother's ring, the safe, the envelope. I told it all in the plainest words I could, every detail like I was threading beads on a string. No embroidery, no emotion, just fact after fact. When I said I didn't take it, I kept my voice steady. Across the room, Sasha leaned back in his chair and smiled at the ceiling, as if the whole thing bored him. Then, Hrynyuk stood. Calm. Confident. "Your Honor, the defense requests permission to present video evidence. 3 synchronized clips." The judge nodded. The clerk fiddled with cables. The screen flickered. Video 1. Mrs. Kovalchuk's door camera. Grainy but clear enough. 1:42 a.m. A figure in a hooded sweatshirt approaches the garage door. Not fumbling, not forcing, unlocking with a key. My stomach lurched. The hall light flared, and for a heartbeat the elbow patch glimmered on his olive jacket. My jacket too, once, until he claimed it. Now the court saw it. The figure disappeared inside, then re-emerged carrying something boxy and heavy. He slipped out of frame. Video 2. Pawnshop security footage, time-stamped 9:07 a.m. the next day. The same jacket, the same gait. This time in color, brighter, crueler. He slid the ring across the glass counter. The clerk asked for ID. He handed it over casually, like it was nothing. The screen paused on the magnified digits of his license number, the last 4 glowing against the wall of the courtroom. 7,312. My brothers. Video 3. The pawnshop parking lot. A car easing into traffic. The license plate froze in high contrast, projected larger than life. Registered to Sasha Petrov. There was no mistaking it. The silence afterward was so thick I could hear my own blood. Sasha's lawyer shifted in his seat, shuffled papers, tried to look like the footage didn't matter. But Sasha himself, for the first time, he wasn't smiling. His jaw tensed, lips pressed tight, eyes darting to the door like a trapped animal. And then Anya's part. She walked to the witness stand, pale but determined, clutching her phone like a weapon. Her voice trembled only once as she described what she'd seen, how he bragged that people would believe me guilty because I was cold. She pressed play on the voice memo. The sound filled the room. Sasha's own voice, smug and low. "Finally got her. Marina's too perfect. She had to crack eventually. Now everyone sees her for what she really is. She'll fold first. She always does." The effect was devastating. The judge's brow furrowed. The clerk blinked hard. Even the bailiff's mouth tightened. My mother in the gallery put her face in her hands. Dad just stared straight ahead, motionless. Hrynyuk let the silence hang, then said softly, "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself." The prosecutor tried to object, muttering about context, but it was weak, desperate. The judge cut him off. "We'll recess," he said, voice flat, heavy. Everyone rose. My knees nearly gave out. Sasha didn't look at me as they let him out, but I saw the twitch in his jaw again, harder this time, and the sheen of sweat at his temple. I sat down slowly, hands trembling. The courtroom buzzed around me, papers shuffling, whispers flaring, but inside all I heard was the faint ringing in my ears, the echo of that single word. Play. It was just a button, just a clip of grainy footage. But it was the sound of my life turning back toward the truth. For the first time in weeks, I let my lungs fill all the way. And as I exhaled, I knew, no matter what came next, the story was no longer his to tell. The verdict came down with the weight of inevitability. The evidence was too neat, too undeniable. The judge ruled against him, ordered restitution, acknowledged the slander, left the criminal part to the state to pursue. My lawyer leaned close, whispered, "You're free now," like it was a blessing. But freedom felt strange. The courtroom emptied around me. Papers gathered, benches creaked, footsteps faded. I sat still, staring at the blank screen where his jacket had been magnified. That patch of fabric had saved me. Not love, not trust. A frayed corner of cloth and a camera lens. Outside, the air was sharp and wet, the kind of spring day where everything smells like thawed dirt. Mom was waiting, a small figure clutching a plastic grocery bag full of photographs. She didn't reach for me right away. Instead, she opened the bag and slid the pictures into my hands. Me at 6, with missing front teeth. Sasha at 10 holding a soccer trophy. The two of us in matching sweaters one Christmas. Her eyes brimmed. "I kept these," she said softly, "because I wanted to remember before everything." "Mom," she shook her head, a jerky, broken motion. "I don't know how to forgive him. But I don't know how to forgive myself either. I saw what I wanted to see. I told myself lies so I didn't have to face his." Her hand hovered, then landed lightly on my arm. "Teach me how to look at things straight," she whispered. "Like you did." I swallowed hard. I wanted to rage, to scream about how she had chosen him over me until the very end. But she stood there, not as the mother who had believed him, but as a woman with her shoulders bent under decades of choices. So I just nodded. Dad came later, outside my apartment, his hands shoved in his coat pockets. He said only 2 words. "I'm sorry." It was the most I'd ever heard him admit fault. It sounded like it cost him something, so I accepted it, even if it felt too small for the wreckage left behind. As for Sasha, he struck a deal with the state. Lesser charges, community service, mandatory repayment. His social media went dark. The silence was almost louder than his posts had been, a void where his voice had ruled for weeks. I didn't miss it. At work, my boss called me in, awkward in her tailored suit. "The client wants you back," she said. "They saw the news." She tried to smile, but her eyes flickered. I realized then that even when proven innocent, a stain never fully lifts. Still, I accepted. Not because I needed their approval, but because I wasn't going to let him take my career too. Life shifted in small ways. I set firmer boundaries. I stopped apologizing for being quiet, for keeping receipts, for living carefully. Cold, he'd called me. But cold had saved me. Cold was steady. Cold didn't crumble under lies. Sometimes when I boil water in my own kitchen, the kettle whistles and I feel my throat tighten, the sound dragging me back to that night. But now I let it scream. I don't rush to silence it. I let it shriek until the air vibrates, until it dies down on its own. Because I survived it. The last memory I keep replaying isn't the footage, or the pawnshop receipt, or even Anya's trembling testimony. It's that moment in court. The judge's voice cutting through everything. Play. The screen lighting up, the truth unfurling frame by frame. That was the moment I got my name back. I didn't steal the ring. I didn't steal the money. But my brother stole weeks of my life, my family's trust, the way people looked at me, and in that instant, when the camera showed his patched jacket and the room went silent, I stole something back. Not revenge, not even justice. I stole back myself.